Okay, so to get started here, when we left off our create account route, or create user route rather, we were able to send emails using SendGrid to the user that was signing up, but those emails didn't actually do anything yet, right? So what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to generate a code for our user that they can use to verify that they own that email. So here's what that's going to look like. And the good news here is that it's actually quite an easy task since we already have all of the packages that we're going to need for this. So up at the top here, what we're going to do is we're going to import the UUID package. Okay, so we'll say import v4 as UUID from UUID. And we're going to use this package to generate the rather lengthy random code that we'll be adding to our email. So let's go down here to where we're sending our email, and really the main thing we're going to change here is this text of the message we're sending. So what we're going to do is up here, right, before we insert our user into the database and before we even define the user's data, you'll see why that is in a second, we're going to say const verification code equals UUID. Okay, and this verification code thing is now a long random string that we're going to both insert into the database on this user, and we're also going to insert that verification code in a link, which we'll be putting in the message data text here. So pretty straightforward, I suppose. We're going to say verification code inside the new user object here, which will take care of inserting it into the database. And then down here in the text, we're actually going to change the text to backticks first of all. So I'm going to change it to that since we'll be inserting a value into it. And we're going to change this message here to something like, hello, you just signed up for our website. Your email verification code. And then we're going to insert the verification code into that. All right. Now, what we've just done here is something that I see on a few sites, not a lot of them, and that is basically where instead of clicking on a link in the email, the user actually has to copy and paste a verification code. Okay, so essentially what that would look like if we were going to do it this way, which we're not, but just bear with me here. If we were going to do it this way, the flow would look a little bit different, right? The user would create an account on the create account page. This would send the user to, probably some kind of page that said blah, blah, blah. You need to verify your email, etc. And this page, instead of sending the user back to the login page, would take the user to a page that would allow them to enter the code that we sent them in the email, and then that would actually log them into the app, right? So they could see all the notes, blah, blah, blah. The main content of the app, essentially. So that's one way that I've seen to kind of streamline this process, right, without having to have the user log back in. But we're actually going to do this a little bit differently. And instead of having the user copy and paste the verification code, especially since it's such a long one, we're going to say, please click this link to verify your email. Okay, and instead of this just being a verification code now, we're actually going to have to create a page on our website that this link will send the user to. Here, I'm just going to adjust the indentation and stuff here. What we're going to do instead is we're going to say http://localhost 3000/verify/verification code, okay? So what we're going to do essentially is create a new verification landing page here that will pull this verification code out of the URL parameter and send it to the server to try and verify that user's email. All right, so what I just described there is going to suggest that we're going to need a few more routes on both our front end and our back end. So on our front end, we're going to need to create the landing page for this once the user clicks on this thing. And essentially what this landing page is going to do is it's going to say loading while it sends a request to the server with this verification code to see if that code is valid. And then depending on whether or not that code is valid, it's going to show one of two things. One thing that it could show is success, right? It might say something, success, yay, you've logged in, everything is good. The other possibility is that the verification code wasn't valid or something like that. right? Or maybe the user already verified their email or something like that. In this case, it would display something not quite so happy. So that's essentially what we're going to do. We're going to create one page, basically, that's going to be this up here, and that page is going to have two different things that it can display depending on the result of the request that it's going to make. Now, on the back end, of course, we're going to need to have a verify route. Now, that'll probably look something like this and say /verify or something like that. And then it'll probably include this verification code either in the request body or as a URL parameter. We'll talk about that more when we get there. So that's our basic plan. Let's jump right in. And let's start off, I suppose, by creating the landing page here that the user will come to when they click on that verification link. So in our front end, we're going to create a new page, which we'll call verification landing page.js. And here's what this component's going to look like. We're just going to say export const verification landing page. All right, it's not going to take any props, but it is going to get the value of the URL parameter for the route that it's a part of. And to do that, we're going to need the use params hook from React Router DOM. There we go. And let's just define the route, I suppose. Let's open up routes.js. And we'll go down to here after the please verify email page. That seems like a logical spot for this. And we're going to say route. The path here is going to be /verify/ and then we'll do the verification code. And inside here is where we're going to put the page that we just created. So we'll say /route. And if we open up the create user route again, yep, just to double check that that matches up with what we just put for the path. Everything's looking good so far, so let's go back and finish the verification landing page. Essentially what we're going to do here is make a request as soon as this page is loaded. So we're going to need a use state hook for that, and we're going to need the use effect hook for that. Those are both imported from React, of course. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a state variable called isLoading, which will obviously keep track of whether or not we've gotten a result back for the email verification. So we're going to say isLoading, set isLoading. This is, of course, going to be true to begin with. We'll say use state true. And for the use params, we're going to say const verification code equals use params. Okay? Now we're also going to have a variable called isSuccess and set isSuccess. And this is basically just going to determine whether or not the verification was successful. So this is going to start off as false here. I guess it could start off as either true or false, but we'll just have it start off as false. And then what we're going to need to do, now that we have all of these things, is we're going to need to use the useEffect hook to make a request to the server. And granted, we're going to be making a request to an endpoint that doesn't yet exist, so just bear with me here, but this is going to be the basic flow that we're looking for. We're going to say useEffect, and inside here, obviously we're just going to want this to fire once, so we'll add that empty array as the second argument here. And inside here, we're going to define an asynchronous function, which we'll call verify. And this is going to be async. And what it's going to do, we're going to use Axios. So let's go up and import Axios from Axios up at the top here. And now we're going to make the request by saying const response equals await Axios.put. And we're just going to use a put request here because this is really more updating server data than creating new server data. So what we're going to do is say Axios.put, and the route here will be something like /email verification. And the body that we're going to include is going to have the verification code in it. So we'll just say verification code. And that should be all we really need for now. The next thing that we're going to do is check to see if the actual response is successful, and we're just going to indicate that with the status code. So we don't even really need the response. We're just going to say await Axios.put inside a try catch block. There we go. We're going to say catch e. And essentially what's going to happen is on our server, if something goes wrong, right, if the verification code doesn't work or something like that, we're just going to return an error status code, which will automatically make this catch block get triggered. So in that case, we'll just want to set is loading to false and is success to true. Okay? And likewise, if everything else is successful, we're going to say is loading false and is success true. Oh, this should be is success false rather. I wasn't really thinking when I said or typed that. So is loading false is success true, is loading false is success false is what this is going to look like. So now we just need to call verify inside the use effect hook. And of course, we're going to want to make sure that there's a verification code there. So we'll just add that to the use effect hook's dependencies. Oh, and I don't know what I was thinking here. This should be set is loading, set is success, and set is loading, set is success. I really was not thinking about that when I typed them. Anyway, so now all we need to do is use the is loading and is success state variables to determine what gets shown on this page. Now the easiest thing to show is if we're loading, so we're going to say if is loading, then we're just going to display a big old loading message. We'll say something like return, and I don't know, we can use an H1 heading, I suppose. We're going to say loading ... And if it's not loading, right, if we've gotten past this if statement, the next thing to check is if we were successful. So in that case, we're going to say if is success. Then in that case, what we want to do is return some kind of a little bit more explanatory message. And what that's going to look like, we're just going to have it inside React fragments, I suppose. We'll say something like success, and then under that we'll say something like your email was successfully validated. Okay, with a little smiley face there. Now, on the other hand, if we're no longer loading and is success is false, that means something went wrong, so we're just going to want to say return. And again, inside React fragments, we're going to say as the heading. And for the paragraph tag, we'll say something went wrong while verifying your email. Please try again. Okay, cool. So that's all we really need for our verification landing page. You might want to add some more exciting styling to this page or something if you want to, but that should take care of doing everything. So the next thing that we need to do, obviously, is actually display this page in the route that we set up here. So let's say verification landing page. That was just automatically imported for me. And now if we try and sign up with a new user, okay, so we're going to go back here, go to the create account page. And since I already used my email here, right, I already used this one to sign up, so we're going to get an error from our server just because of the logic that we wrote. Now, there's something tremendously helpful that can help us get around this here, and you may already know this trick, but when you're signing up for sites with your email, you can actually put a plus sign after the first part of the email, right, before the @ sign, and you can put basically any label you want after this. So you could say plus test1, for example, and the nice thing about this is that this will still make its way back to your inbox, right? It'll go to the same email as it would have if you just didn't have the plus sign, etc. after that. This is generally used by people to see what sites are selling their data, right? It's kind of a interesting exercise to do that. Just sign up for different sites like, I don't know, Facebook or those kind of sites with this label and see which ones are actually selling your data, because you'll start getting emails from other companies that say plus Facebook after it or something like that. I'm just using Facebook as an example. I don't know if they actually sell data like that or not. So anyway, that's how we're going to get around the difficulty of having to go back in, delete our email account every time just to test our create account page. So that should save you a lot of time. It took me a while to figure that one out myself. All right, so let's now add a password in here and click on create account. And it looks like we have a network error. That is because we haven't run our application. We're going to say npm run dev, and we'll try this all over again. We might have to retype it if it refreshes. Yep, sure enough, we have to retype it. So let's try that again. We're going to use the label technique here to do test one, and we're going to say, hey, just put your email there, and then a password and another password, and we'll click create account. And we should see, thanks for signing up, blah, 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 blah. And we should get another email with that updated information in it. So just let me open that up in another window here, and I'll show you. And sure enough, there we go. So what you see here, you're going to be a little bit confused at first, right? Because this is definitely not the URL that we set up for our application. In fact, it's a SendGrid URL. Now, the reason that this looks like this is because by default, SendGrid will actually try and track who's opening your emails by basically rewriting the URLs in your emails to their own URLs so that they can kind of get a piece of the action. So in other words, instead of having the user's email inbox, which I'm just going to draw like this, go directly to your site, okay, which I'm going to draw just like this, right? Go to the login page or something. SendGrid will actually be kind of a middleman here. So it's going to send that to SendGrid. And SendGrid is going to take care of mapping this giant URL here to the actual URL that you originally had in your email. And that will take care of redirecting the user back to your site. So if you want to, you can actually click on this, all right? And it should work. Right, it'll just redirect us back to localhost blah 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 /verify. And something did go wrong because obviously we haven't created that verify route yet, but that works. Now, if you want to get rid of this thing, all you have to do is go back into the SendGrid console and turn off tracking. Okay, so I'm just going to open up the console here, and we're going to go down to tracking under settings. And what you're going to want to do is find open tracking and click tracking. And click tracking is really the only one that we need to turn off if you don't want that email to look like that. Now, before you do this, tracking actually is a very useful thing. It's really nice to be able to tell who's actually opening your emails and what value they're getting out of those emails. But nevertheless, if you want to get rid of that, what you can do is just click on this little pencil. We're going to say disabled. We're going to uncheck that box, and we're going to click on save. Okay, so that should say disabled now. For open tracking, essentially what that is just knowing whether a user opened your email or not by trying to load a tracking pixel from SendGrid, right? It's kind of an ingenious way that it happens, and we're not going to go into too much detail about it now, but we're going to leave that on for now. Cool, so we've turned that off. So what's going to happen is if we try and sign up for our application again, let's just go back to our login page, or our create account page rather, and we'll try creating another account. For this one, we're going to use test2. Oops, that's the wrong suffix there. There we go. And we're going to put our password and re-enter our password and click create account. And now what's going to happen, we're going to see thanks for signing up. And then the email that we're going to get now has the actual URL that we set up. So we can click on that, and that'll take us right to our verification landing page that we created. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.